Have we forgotten just how wild the NBA trade deadline has become? Last year, there were a few minor moves before Bam switched teams, and only stars like Jimmy Butler, De'Aaron Fox, and Brandon Ingram were dealt mid-season. The year before featured role players like Buddy Hield and Gordon Hayward on the move, but 2021 shattered records with 16 trades and 46 players changing squads. The NBA trade deadline has become unpredictable, and this year is no different. While all eyes are on superstars like Giannis, new rumors about role players emerge daily. Let's explore just how wild this deadline could get with 8 potential blockbuster deals. Now, let's shift to Giannis. Have you heard his latest comments?
If my agent is talking to the Bucks about it, he's his own person. He can have any conversation he wants, and there's going to be conversation that's going to be made between him and the Bucks, and it's something that we can't control.
Remember, Giannis has the final say. Agents work for their clients, not the other way around. So any trade demand chatter happening without his knowledge, unlikely. Giannis may not say it outright, but it's clear he's putting pressure on Milwaukee. Can you imagine how frustrating this kind of passive-aggressive behavior must be for the Bucks? If I were a book enthusiast, I'd just come out and say whatever you want. However, he refuses to stop being the bad guy. He wants to push the Bucks to make this decision. But guess what, Giannis? That is not going to happen because Jake Fisher reports. Milwaukee's current messaging is that they want to be buyers at the deadline in order to get Giannis more help. One competitor GM stated that the Bucks had inspired him to go big game hunting. Sorry, Giannis. If you want out, you'll have to ask. No more Mr. Nice Guy. In the meanwhile, dollars are now linked to Zach LaVine and Jerami Grant. Regardless, this insane deadline passes through Milwaukee. But aside from Giannis and Anthony Davis, this move might impact the title race like no other, especially if he ends up in the East. The addition would make most East teams instant favorites. And yes, he is prone to injury. That is something we all know. However, since AD's return, the Mavs have achieved significantly better results against the Nuggets. Rocket Man has elite defense and scored 32 points and 13 rebounds versus Denver. Now his future team will have to discuss an extension. However, with a great playoff run, this may feel more plausible. According to ESPN, bidders for big names include Atlanta, Detroit, and Toronto. Now add the Heat, who are always star hunting. What about the Warriors? They need to make a move if Steph is going to contend again. A two-way star like Anthony Davis, if available at the right price, could be a game changer. Interestingly, Davis's chemistry with his current teammates is solid, but the Mavericks need to finish their own deals to build around Flag. Another star to watch, Trae Young, who's eligible for an extension this offseason. The Hawks reportedly turned him down, and he'd have to take a pay cut to stay, something most stars aren't eager to do at 27. Plus, Atlanta has looked promising without him, especially on defense. In fact, when Trae returned, they allowed 152 points to the Bulls in regulation alone. The bottom line is that unlike John Moran and LaMelo Ball, Trae has a clock ticking, okay? If that happens, he will be a free agent this summer and can go for nothing. Atlanta faces disaster. They also have the Pelicans' choice here. Could easily reach the top 3. Trae Young's excellent replacement plan. Everything aligns for a transaction, but to where? Well, Trae's market is relatively modest. Remember that report from a while back that he'd be willing to travel to San Antonio? The Spurs said no thanks. We'd rather trade for De'Aaron Fox, but at the right price, who knows? The Timberwolves might use a point guard to complement Andre Rockets. And there are always the Kings, but let's get into role players, fear, and Golden State. John Kuminga started the season well and improved his game. However, since then, calamity has occurred. He's practically no longer on the team. He either does not play at all or plays a few useless minutes. It's rather depressing, actually. He is a young child who appears frustrated and depressed. Rock bottom occurred a few weeks ago against the Bulls, the second night of a back-to-back on the road for important rotation players, and JC receives a DNP. Kerr does not appreciate his game. game clearly believes it is low IQ basketball for his high IQ system and refuses to participate. So the finest JC suits Wizards Pels Jazz, I suppose. However, both the Kings and the Suns are allegedly interested, but we have fresh reporting out of Chicago. According to Mark Stein, the Bulls have expressed a greater willingness to trade. Coby White is drawing more interest than ever. His contract expires soon, making him an unrestricted free agent in July, and his $13 million salary makes him an affordable target. This season, he's averaging 21.4 points and 4.5 rebounds per game, though his efficiency has been inconsistent. While he's not elite defensively or as a shooter, he has shown clutch playmaking ability. Sometimes that's the difference maker. So one candidate is the Houston Rockets. So far in December, they've only managed 4-5. Terrible in the clutch. The Warriors blew a 25-point lead to the Pelicans. Something is awry, and Coby could help. Or how about the Mavericks? The point guard is currently destroying them, and Coby is only 25 years old. The money, however, comes afterward. Sabonis. People forget because he is on the Kings, but Domas is unquestionably a winning player, gives everyone around him space and rewards open people with a pass, which improves their offensive performance. Oh, there's a reason why he's made 3 All-Stars and 2 All-NBA teams. What's the downside? Well, his defense is horrible, and his deal is quite pricey. This year and the next 2 will have an average of roughly $45 million. At just 29 years old, Sabonis is in his prime, and his offensive skill set is rare to find at a reasonable trade price. The Warriors could be an ideal fit, perhaps offering Jonathan Kuminga and a first-round pick to get a deal done. That's a fair price for a player of Sabonis' caliber. Meanwhile, it's starting to look like Zion Williamson's time in New Orleans is coming to an end. Why? Because you can't have a max talent like Zion coming off the bench, especially now that he's been replaced by youngster Derek Queen. Things are tricky in NOLA right now because Zion, a high usage player, requires the ball in his hands, while the Pels prefer the ball in the hands of their young guys. So on December 14th against the Bulls, Zion came off the bench for the first time in his life. But hey, he had 18 points in 27 minutes, super efficient, and a victory. So the next game off the bench wasn't as beneficial. However, Pels triumphed this time against the Rockets. Zion has suddenly come off the bench in 4 games, and there are 4. No, they're only 1 and 9 in games. He started. So it seems like we have a formula, except this is not a video game. This is real life. Zion, the #1 choice, has an ego. This cannot carry on forever. On top of that, there have been additional trade rumors floating about for about a year. Plus, it's finished. So what comes next? Well, he will make approximately $4,045 million this year and the following 2 years. That is not guaranteed, but remains difficult to trade. I don't think the Pels get much in exchange, but Zion needs to find a contender to rebuild his reputation and, ideally, his career. However, we must include Chris Paul because the legend's career will come to an end at some point. But which team? Well, I believe a young squad would be the best fit. That guy can mentor. Before the season, the Mavericks and Hornets expressed interest, but he said no, stating that he wanted to play in Los Angeles, which was a mistake. So perhaps he revisits those offers. The Suns' acquisition of Dillon Brooks, however, has proven to be a successful move this season. People assumed that Brooks' career would implode after he left the Grizzlies, yet his old team has slumped without him, while Dillon's is taking off.